Welcome to Colonial, Virginia. Over the next several weeks, you will be learning more about life in the Virginia colony. Keep in mind, though, that Jamestown is just one settlement and the current capital of the Virginia colony. There are settlements all over the state. By the end of this unit, you should be able to do the following. Explain the influence of agriculture and its influence on the institution of slavery. Describe how European immigrants, Africans, and American Indians impacted the cultural landscape of Virginia. Explain why the capital of Virginia moved from Jamestown to Williamsburg and then to Richmond. Explain how money, barter, and credit were used in the Virginia colony. And lastly, describe what everyday life was like in Virginia. In order to fully understand the topics in this unit, you should know what these words mean in the context they are being used. Economy is how a country or region goes about producing and selling goods and services. A cash crop is a crop that is grown to sell for money rather than for use by the growers. Money is a medium of exchange or currency, which includes coins and paper bills. Barter is the trading of goods and services without using money. Credit is buying a good or service now and paying for it later. Debt is when a good, service, or amount of money is owed to another person or business. Savings is money put away to be used at another time. A capital is a city or town that is the site of a state or country government. Contaminated means to be made unsafe for drinking. It is a spread of filth or germs. Immigrants are people that move from one country to another to make a new start. And persecution is being attacked for your beliefs. Next, we need to look at the changing cultural landscape of Virginia. The cultural landscape of an area is simply how a group of people bring their people's architecture, beliefs, and traditions to their new homes. When the Virginia Company of London founded Jamestown, they hoped to copy England in America, but that did not happen. Soon, there were many people from many other cultures living there, not just the Indians, the Africans, and the English settlers. There were people from Germany, Scotland, and Ireland as well. Even though it was a colony of England, Virginia developed its own unique culture that was totally different than England. And by the mid-1700s, people were beginning to call themselves Virginians, not Englishmen. As immigrants settled in new areas, Virginia kept changing. They were coming from different places and perspectives, but they were all looking for a fresh start. Most were looking for financial success or trying to escape religious persecution, or a combination of both. Wherever they settled, they began to change the culture and the landscape so that it reflected their own customs and beliefs. Examples can be seen in the homes, barns, and places of worship that they built. Think about it this way. When you move to a new neighborhood, city, state, or country, you are going to bring the things that are important with you. These immigrants were doing the same thing. As immigrants were settling, new towns were popping up all across the colony. Some places took Indian names, such as Tappahannock, and, much later, the city of Roanoke. Others chose names that reminded them of towns they had left in Europe, such as Richmond in England and Strasbourg in Germany. Language changed too. As Virginians and Indians traded with one another, many Indian words became part of our vocabulary, words like moccasin and raccoon. By the 1700s, newcomers from Scotland, Ireland, Germany, and Africa had begun to change Virginia's culture even more. The first colonists had mostly come from England, and almost all settled in the Tidewater and Piedmont regions. But that soon changed. Take a moment to examine this map and its legend. You can see here that many of these groups overlapped. The American Indians lived throughout Virginia. The English and Africans were in the coastal plains and Piedmont regions, and the Germans and Scots-Irish settled in the northern part of the Valley and Ridge region. The Scots-Irish settled in big numbers in the Shenandoah Valley in the 1700s. Many had come from Pennsylvania, where they had been servants, but they wanted land they found in the Valley and Ridge region of Virginia. Their tough ways helped them to survive in an unsettled frontier, and their way of talking and singing still survives in the melodies and lyrics of today's country music. Fast fiddlers, clog dancing, and twangy country and folk music all owe a lot to Scots-Irish traditions. The 1600s and 1700s were terrible years in parts of Europe, especially in Germany, which was torn apart by war and religious persecution. Like the Scots-Irish, many Germans fled to America, going first to Pennsylvania, which welcomed people of all religions. As farmland became scarce there, the Germans moved south into the Shenandoah Valley. Unlike the English settlers, the Germans came in big groups. Sometimes entire villages arrived together. Their culture remains an important part of Virginia life to this day, especially in the Valley and Ridge region. One of the impacts they had in the Shenandoah Valley was on the architecture. Germans built their homes from stone instead of wood, and the biggest room in the house was the kitchen. In the kitchen, you wouldn't find a fireplace for cooking and heating like in most other colonial homes. Instead, you would find a large iron stove. This tells us a lot about the values that the Germans held, and we can infer that food and cooking was important to their culture. Knowing that they traveled in large groups, it may tell us that meal times were important community time. We can also see their architecture in the German-style bank barns, which had 2 levels, one for the animals and one for feed and storage. Next, we need to look at Virginia's Indian population. Before English settlers arrived, American Indians lived all across Virginia, but the Europeans changed everything for them. Competition for farmlands and hunting grounds with the colonists and other Indian groups led to violence. Many Virginia Indians were forced to abandon their homelands and move inland. The last group of people we're going to look at is the group that had the least voice in where they went or what they did. Even with that being said, Africans had a huge impact on Virginia's cultural landscape. By the late 1600s, many enslaved Africans lived in Virginia's Tidewater and Piedmont regions. Tobacco plantations needed a big labor force, and the Africans were the people to do the job. New crops were grown, such as peanuts and, in South Carolina, rice. A unique African musical heritage, including the banjo, began to have an impact on American culture. Take a moment to read this chart, which summarizes where each cultural group settled in Virginia.